What's going on, everyone? This is Cadman Cycling. Welcome in. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day. Back to some Zwift racing for me. This is stage 2 of Race Like a Champ. Will take us around the Knickerbocker route in New York City. This is a category C race. That's about 2.5 to 3.2 watts per kilogram. Total of 22.5 kilometers, 346 meters of elevation gain. Most of that elevation gain, I think about 200 meters, is in the KOM, 1.4 kilometers with a 6% average gradient. So it's back to racing. I spent a couple months, actually since last April, off of Zwift. Just joined back about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Wasn't quite ready to jump into a race immediately. Zwift races are tough, kind of all-out races, I've found. They take a lot out of me, and you can't really go from having no fitness to just immediately jumping into a Zwift race that starts almost with an all-out sprint. So try to do a little bit of building up the endurance. I started with the Zwift Academy rides. I didn't do the baseline or the finishing rides, but I did the 6 workouts in between. So just tried to utilize those to work on some anaerobic, some aerobic fitness, and just get the legs moving again, getting them prepped for these races. So find myself back here. Kind of interesting. So I'm in the white Trek jersey. There's actually another rider in the same jersey as me. I don't usually see that in these races. Not a teammate or anything, just a coincidence. So racing at the category C level. Getting started here, we have 33 riders. Not a crazy start, the usual kind of Zwift push as everyone gets out of the starting gates, but really grouped up together. Just jumped from 1 kilometer to now 3 kilometers in, pretty much the same group. Started with 33 total. I'd say this group has maybe 20, kind of near the front of it right now, so it's hard to tell. We'll see as I drop back. It's really a waiting game to the big climb for these first few kilometers. That first climb, I want to say is at 10 kilometers. But kind of with the nature of the New York City course is there's really not many flats. It's a lot of undulations, a lot of quick ups and downs, not really climbs per se, besides that one big New York KOM that takes you from Central Park up onto the actual like elevated roads that Zwift's built. But just a lot of ups and downs. This is one of the ups. Again, it's not a climb by any means, but we did just jump up to 4%, 5% gradient for a few hundred meters. So the reason I skipped forward to this point in the race is this is kind of the first point where the group is getting strung out. We're just over 3.5 kilometers in. Really no one should be too fatigued, but again, just starting to get into their rhythm, dial down their breathing, see what watts feel comfortable and how everyone's feeling on that specific race day. My heart rate's sitting at 177, pretty typical for a race, about almost 4 kilometers in. This climb is actually a bit longer than I remembered. We're all the way up to 8%. All of a sudden it's strung out, and I kind of immediately find myself in a situation not really knowing what to do. I fell back a little bit too far. It's strung out. I realized just as we crest the top of that hill that this is dangerous. It looks like there's 5 or 6 riders up front that if they immediately bunch up together after cresting the top of that climb or the hill, they could immediately get a gap and start gaining ground, and I might never see them again in the race. So recognize this as kind of a pretty big threat, especially at this point. Now it's me and these 3 other riders kind of single file all spread out, and it looks like that front group has bunched together. So what we need to do is immediately bunch together, start putting the power down, which is exactly what we're doing here. So it's nice that we kind of group together, try to use some draft. Again, there's less of us here than in the front group though, so with them 5 seconds ahead right now, definitely have to increase the power. So you can see that I'm doing that kind of around that 280 to 300 range. kind of interesting. I took an FTP test actually before I started the workout. So my first jump back onto Zwift in a few months was immediately try to ramp test. And my FTP was rated at 214 watts, which is definitely lower than previously, but again, no fitness. So just gives an idea of exactly where I dropped down to and what I'm working with now. But to push the 300 watts, definitely above my FTP, but necessary if I wanted to have any chance to get back with this front group. So over the last minute or so there, put in some work. Heart rate's up to 184, 185, which is fine for short efforts, but can't sustain that for another 17 kilometers. Again, we're still at the start of this race, but it was just a really interesting situation there where it was a pretty big threat. We just now catch back on with that front group. So it looks like that front group was 6 riders, 4 of us in the chase group, just now jumping back in with that main group. So need to now do my best to recover, make sure I avoid any situations like what just occurred going forward, but really just need to recover and stick with this group as we get closer to that big KOM. There's no way that this huge group will stay together on the KOM. It'll kind of separate some of the climbers who will go out in front. But really the goal right now is just be with this front group at the point that we get to the start of that climb. So bit of a dangerous situation. Luckily, I was able to work with a few of the other riders around me, and we were able to catch back onto this group. So time to recover. And just like that, recovered for a couple kilometers and find ourselves just at the base of the climb. So I think I said 10 kilometers earlier. Looks like it's a little bit less. The climb should start around 8 kilometers. And again, we're already at 100 meters elevation gain. So that just speaks to the undulations of New York. But here we go. This is the straight climb, just under 1.5 kilometers, average gradient of 6%, but I think there's pieces of it that get to 17 or 18%. I do have a feather. I don't want to use it immediately just because the gradient doesn't start extremely, or grade, not gradient, start extremely rough, but I'm stuck. So this is extremely frustrating. What I actually did is I stood up on the pedals, I switched to a different gear, and immediately my chain fell off. So just as the climb starts, you see my rider sitting here, but off the bike, I jumped off my bike. I'm kind of next to it, trying to get the chain back on, and I'm just sitting here watching riders go by. Unfortunately, my chain actually didn't really fall off, but it actually kind of got stuck in the front derailleur. So it wasn't as easy as just putting it back on and putting in a quick dig to try to catch the front group. It was actually jammed in there, and that's why it took me, I don't know, maybe that was 10, 15 seconds to actually get it back on. And unfortunately, stuff like that happens on Zwift. So skip forward now to the top of the climb. I'm in 18th place out of 33. Dropped by the front group, really have no chance of getting back on, but want to make as much as I can of this race and this workout. Definitely a chance to get better, especially this being my first race. I definitely had no expectations of sticking with the front group or contesting a finish. It's all about building back up to where I can be. So cresting the top of the KOM, there's riders all over the place, so that kind of happens with a climb. Everyone gets spread out, but now we'll get to the descent. One rider behind me, another one in front of me. It's kind of extremely helpful if on the descent we can group up together, use the super tuck where possible, and stick together and just start making up ground on the people ahead of us. So that's exactly what I'll try to do here. So for those who are newer to Zwift, I think anytime a rider's over 57 kilometers per hour and the grade is negative 3% or lower, you should be able to super tuck. So that's exactly what we're doing here. This is a pretty steep downhill section. So I'll utilize the super tuck whenever possible, and at the kind of small portions where it's more near a 0% grade, I'll put in some power to make sure I keep the speed up, but ultimately just recovering from the previous climb as much as possible. I probably didn't go quite as all out as I would have if I was still with that front group. I would have pushed a lot harder to try to stick with the first few people in that group, just trying to stay with the front and contest the finish. Once I got dropped and was on my own, I didn't quite have the same need or want to push crazy high watts. It was much more of a moderated effort. So wasn't crazy tired at the top of the climb. I mean, pushed hard, but wanted to make sure I had enough left. So still kind of going between super tucking when I can and putting in efforts on the more flat portions. But good to stick with this group. So it'll be nice to work with this group. We're over halfway done with this race now. And kind of just checking in. I'm at 166 beats per minute, which is amazing. I never see it that low in a race. I think that's just because I haven't been pedaling for the majority of the past couple minutes. It'll jump back up pretty quickly now that we're back on the roads of Central Park. So went ahead and skipped forward to the 2K mark. So it was me and those two other riders going down that KOM segment. I think we caught a few more. I think even there was a solo rider that caught us as well, who put in a real nice effort to be able to catch us. But ultimately end in this group that it looks like we're going to finish with. So there's 7 of us. I'm thinking we're the second group on the road now. That would leave, about 10 in the front group contesting the finish. And then we're here we even have it looks like a mountain biker. But yeah, just kind of moderating the effort. No reason to be in front, pushing wind right now. Want to stay behind these guys as much as possible. Save my energy for the front. And exactly what I'm thinking right now. Again, I haven't been racing a whole lot, especially on this map. So I know that New York, the main banner is on a hill. So if you come at it from one side, it's downhill. If you come at it from the other side, it's uphill. I actually didn't know which way I was coming in from. So I knew it had that feature. I just wasn't sure exactly which it was. Because you definitely use different strategies. Coming downhill, you want your speed going over the crest of the hill before the downhill, and then probably start sprinting a little bit earlier. If it's an uphill, you probably wait a little bit longer to start your sprint, just because uphill you won't go as fast and it would be a longer effort if you start from your normal sprint spot. I generally start to look at sprinting in the 200 to 250 meter range. Sometimes I do a few short bursts of efforts. A lot of times I find I can't put in a full sprint from 250 meters, so I'll burst for 50 meters, kind of sit down for a little bit as my speed gets higher, and then put in another burst at the end. So this is my first try to sprint in quite a while. At about this point, I'm thinking that we're hitting the uphill portion. Again, I was still trying to decide if we were finishing up or down, but 400 meters left. Notice now that it's the uphill, so no need to start sprinting, just thinking about positioning. I want to be in the middle of this group. Definitely don't want to be pushing wind on the front. At the 250 meter mark, a few guys start sprinting, so I use my undraftable. It doesn't help a whole lot, but better than nothing. Really good strategy by those few riders to really up their speed before hitting the start of the uphill section. I waited a little bit too long. Was still happy with this effort I put out. Wasn't able to catch that front rider though, who did a really good job at putting in effort early to kind of slingshot up that hill. But overall, 41 minutes, really trying to get better at the longer races. That's something I'll be working on this year that I didn't really have last year. Average watts per kg at 2.8. So that puts me in 46th total. I believe it was somewhere around 13th in the C category. I'll throw up the Zwift power standings. But guys, really happy with this. Bummed that my chain fell off and I couldn't stick with the front group. there it is, 13th in category C. But a lot of work to do. Excited for the future races and getting better, and overall good to be back. Enjoy making these videos on YouTube. So guys, if you like this content, please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here uploading videos and racing on Zwift. So guys, thanks for being here. And until next time, this is Cadman Cycling. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.